welcome to Tell Us Something. This presentation is being recorded by Missoula Community Access Television as part of a media assistance grant donated to Tell Us Something by MCAT. When you walked in, you were handed an audience participation paper, some of you were. Please share your Stranger in a Strange Land story on that sheet. On either one of those bars, there's a box. You can drop it into that box. We're going to share them live at intermission, and I'll talk more about how that's going to work later because we're going to do it differently for those of you who've been here before. Please silence your cell phones and other mobile devices. It is important to actively listen to one another, join together, and to support each other and share stories. This is your community, and these are your stories. Thank you for your support of each other and of each other's stories. Tell Us Something believes that everyone has a story and that everyone's story matters. How many of you have been here before? Yeah? How many new people do we have? Thank you for being here. I'm very, very grateful to all of you. I want to give you a little rundown of how this works. 8 storytellers. They each have 10 minutes to tell a true personal story from memory on the theme Stranger in a Strange Land. Your job is to actively practice listening to them. So open your minds, open your hearts, and open your ears. Oh, and after 9 minutes, there's going to be a little gong. Can you give us a sample of that, please? That doesn't mean get off the stage. That means we've got a minute remaining, and it's for the storyteller to sort of check in too and say, oh, okay, I got to wrap it up. So that's not anything mean. You can make comments, but only when I'm talking. Every Tell Us Something event is focused on a theme. Tonight's theme is Stranger in a Strange Land. Mike Jakupcak is a 76-year-old retired professor who was born in South Chicago. Mike has been a Montana resident for over 40 years and is the grandfather of 3 boys and 3 girls. He is a cancer survivor and has been married to the same woman for nearly 48 years. Mike is a secret shopper and a Subaru ambassador. Please welcome Mike Jakupcak.
Good evening. It began with a vacuum cleaner propped up in the back seat of a 1969 Buick Skylark. On 2 numerous occasions, the vacuum cleaner would flop down and hit the tail of a West Highland White Terrier named Fuzzywig. Unfortunately, it also disturbed our 8-month-old son, Matthew, who was seated next to Fuzzywig. The 1969 Buick Skylark was dutifully equipped to come to Montana. 2 doors, no snow tires, towing a 4x6 U-Haul trailer, stuffed with pillows, a rocking chair, and toilet paper. We had lots of toilet paper. For some reason, my relatives in South Chicago believed that Montana was a vast tundra devoid of any urban amenities, igloos, outhouses, and perhaps corn cobs. Thus began my second venture into Montana. Now, the first trip was a little bit more comfortable. I came on a Frontier flight out of Chicago, seated next to a gentleman from Montana Power and a graduate student named Howie, who looked a lot like Art Garfunkel, hair out to here. When we arrived at the Missoula airport, I vacated and was met very quickly by a gentleman with a beard named Evan Jordan. Evan is still with us. He's 95 years old and remains a good friend. Evan looked at me, and I was dutifully attired in a Yugoslavian-made velvet blue suit. The collar was probably, I can't go that far, out to here, and as well there was a tie that could have very well served as a napkin. When I got off the plane, Evan looked at this and said, it's not going to work. And I said, what do you mean, sir? He said, you can't be like that. Now, I had no idea what he meant, but I assumed it had something to do with my attire. We got into his RV, and he learned that Howie, my seatmate, was also staying at the Executive Motor Inn. So he, in Montana fashion, offered him a ride as well. On the way there, he said, you know, Mike, ditch the suit. There's a place called the Mercantile around the corner from Executive Inn. Go there, get a pair of jeans, a shirt, and then I think you'll be ready for the first part of the interview. I naturally did what I was told because I thought this was part of the interview process, attire. So I went over to the Mercantile and found jeans and the shirt. And as Howie was checking in, he said, hey, you know what? Would you like a joint? I was wide-eyed, and being from Chicago, I knew what he was talking about, but I figured maybe he was part of the interview process. And I knew the right answer was, thanks a lot, Howie, but no thanks. And I thought maybe I had passed two parts of the interview, dress and moral character. So I was well on my way. Later that evening, Evan picked me up, and we went out to a ranch in the middle of nowhere up Butler Creek. Butler Creek's out by the airport. When we arrived, there was a log cabin and an outhouse, so my relatives were actually right. I knew that was there. And they said, let's go for a trail ride. And I said, okay. Now, being from South Chicago, we're not accustomed to a lot of horses. There's some at Arlington Racetrack, but I'd never been there. So I was helped on top of Thunder, aptly named, one-eyed horse, and we trotted out a ways into the forest. At some point, they all left, and there I was on Thunder, sure that the camp and the cabin was somewhere this way, but not sure how the hell to get there. But Thunder knew, and Thunder went at his own pace. He stopped, ate grass, took me just as a little test under some brambles, and after what seemed an interminably long time, I arrived at the cabin, and sure enough, there's a campfire. There were professors that were dressed like cowboys. They did the interview, and I guess I did okay. I must have passed, because now I was on my way a couple of months later in the Buick, headed to Montana. We passed through Big Timber and the winds, which shook the 4x6 trailer somewhat, onto Livingston, up an icy road, and finally arrived at our destination, Missoula, Montana. I called our host from the recreation center, the UC, which was new at that time. It had just been built a couple of years earlier. And they told me how to get to Eddy Street, which is where we arrived, with the 4x6 trailer, the dog, and the 8-month-old son. We immediately ingratiated ourselves to our host by, one, flushing what we thought was a disposable diaper, which was not, down the drain and flooding their downstairs. Secondly, and I don't want to embarrass my son, but Matthew did what 8-month-old boys sometimes do on their bright new white linen sheet. And the dog chimed in by doing what dogs do in their upstairs bedroom. So now we were desperate. we started to look for some place to live. My initial salary at the University of Montana was $11,500. I remember that specifically. So we were somewhat limited in what we could find in the Missoula area, not unlike what we have going on today. One day went past, 2 days went past. Our hosts were getting a little uneasy. Cynthia Bryan from Realty was no help. But they had a call-in show. And my wife said, help, we're desperate. A cleaning lady was just finishing up vacuuming and cleaning the rug in what was a downstairs basement of a double wide. When I told my folks back in the Midwest, they said, oh, you're living in the basement of a trailer. How does that work? When we learned it was in the Rattlesnake, I immediately thought what might be coiled in one of the closets. Later on, of course, I learned that it was the creek, not the animal, which I was very fortunate for. So we arrived on Murray Street. We unloaded what was then the rocking chair, the pillows, and the toilet paper. We had that, and began to settle in. We learned that there are yard sales and estate sales in our vicinity, and we took liberties with that venture, and that worked very, very well. We learned a great deal about where we were and what we needed to do. Many years have now passed, almost 50 years. The Buick was replaced by Jeeps, and now Subarus, of course. You knew that. The 8-month-old boy is now a father of 3 sons and recently moved here from Seattle to the university area to raise his family. The West Highland White Terrier is going to be replaced by Beagles and Bassets and Bulldogs, and now Lily, our Mastiff. I'd like to end with something that I did not write for this, which seems to fit. And you may or may not recognize the author. He traveled around with a dog named Charlie. What Steinbeck wrote was this: I'm in love with Montana. For other states, I have affection, respect, and recognition, even some affection at times. But with Montana, it's love. And it's difficult to analyze love when you're in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Jason Forges is interested in creating a space where facilitated social issue discussions can be had while figuring out actionable steps to move forward. Jason is originally from Florida and has triumphantly survived 2 Missoula winters. Please welcome Jason Forges.
Yeah, I think I'm good. All right. Yeah, nervous. So first, when I think of the theme, I think of me being in Montana and me being black in Montana. So I say that to say that I would not be talking about my black experience here in Montana. But I guess I should ask a question first. Who here went to see Donald Trump here in Missoula by show of hands? Anyone? Anyone? Okay, well, I did. All right. So I remember hearing something profound. It was something that said you can't be angry and curious at the same time. And the reason being is because when you're angry, you just get so caught up and stuck in yourself. So you don't have the opportunity to see other people's perspectives or the environment you're in. And obviously, I think being curious is the opposite of that. So I really try to be curious in the spaces I enter. And I remember one day I was working, I was hearing, it was on the radio, and I just hear, it was during the elections, and it says Donald Trump is coming to Missoula. So the people at work, I know I see some of their faces, like the disgusted face, and it was like weird, and I'm like, okay, but for me, like I got excited, I'm like, oh, I want to go. So the first thing I did was, I'm like, oh, I'm going to call some of my friends. So what I did is I made phone call after phone call after phone call, asking, hey, you want to go? Hey, you trying to go? You want to go? And I got, what? No, why are you going? No, hard pass. So after being that discouraged, I decided to make a call, and I called my friend Lisa. And I called Lisa, and it was kind of like that slow talk, like, hey, you know, I'm about to go to this Trump thing. You want to go? Thinking she's going to say no, but she said, oh, yeah, I'll go. So I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. And she said, oh, well, it's this Democratic rally that's going on, so we can go to that, too. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll go to that. And she said, oh, yeah, and I'll bring my camera. We'll take pictures. I'm like, oh, yeah, do that. And then she said, oh, okay, I'll drive. I'm like, oh, yeah, great. I don't have to put gas in the tank. And then she said, oh, yeah, then we can do interviews. I'm like, what? And then she said, oh, wait, we can do this. I'm like, wait, no, listen. I'm just here to be curious. So when we decided to leave the Democratic rally, let's say, she was asking me what time I wanted to get there. I don't remember the time it started, but let's say it started at 2. And she asked me, what time are you trying to get there, Jason? And I'm like, 11. And she said, what? Why so early? Because I said, I figured it's going to be packed. So we decided to leave maybe like an hour and 30 minutes before leaving the Democratic rally, hour and 30 minutes before. And it was traffic like crazy. So we decided to take Boardwalk and, thinking of Monopoly, Broadway. All right. So we decided to take Broadway, and, well, we didn't take Broadway, I lied. We took the highway, not Broadway. And when we got off the highway, it was interesting to see because it was a guy at the exit. He was just holding a sign, and he had a wolf mask on. And with that wolf mask, he had like an arrow and said, sheep this way. And I laughed at that, and I definitely took a video of that just because it was creative. It was creative. But also, it got me, again, to kind of see a different perspective because I've been doing facilitations with, I did a piece with Martin Luther King with a team of people facilitating a discussion and of a documentary called King in the Wilderness. And in that, it was talking about Dr. King and his experience going to Chicago. And down south, you can see when it comes to racism and how profound that people was open about those things. And the idea was, hey, you know, this goes down in the South, but up north it's a different experience. And when Dr. King went over there to Chicago, what he realized was, his friend talked about it, that he said he's seen the most, it's either the same hate or even more hate than he ever experienced in the South. And when I heard that, I just seen people in the rally. There was like people having bats. They say, hey, we want King, dropping, hey, nigger, we don't want you here. And all he's doing is doing a peaceful protest. And when I seen that wolf mask, yeah, it was funny at the time, but also I feel like sometimes when we don't agree with things, the way we go about it is in an unhealthy way, and that kind of was like a reflection of that. So we get off the exit, we're driving, and it's traffic everywhere, and we had to park way in the back. The airport's here, but what happened is you have to take the bus, and once you take the bus, it takes you to the airport. So we're walking over there, and as we're walking, I see like a sidewalk that people are waiting in line. I'm like, okay, long line, but I'm going to make it. But then you have to follow this line in the back. I'm like, all right, this is back. Okay, that's cool. And then all of a sudden, it's a big open field, and there's tons of people, and it's just lines after line, and we're at the end. So then I'm like, oh, shoot. Oh, I told you, Lisa. I told you. So me and Lisa's in line. We're walking the line, and I see two people there, or it's some black folks there selling Trump hats. And I was like, what in the world? Because I was looking at it because I was thinking, I thought I was going to be the only black person here. Nah, but I was curious to see why they were doing it, and my friend Lisa, she was in that same boat. And then again, talk about perspective, it kind of clicked with me, because growing up in the community I grew up in, people sold drugs, and it wasn't because they was trying to hurt people in the community. Is, hey, that's the only way I know how to live, so therefore I'm going to do what I got to do to support my family and myself. And when I see that perspective, I'm thinking, oh, I'd much rather you sell hats than go out there and deal drugs in your community. So I'm standing in line, and while we're going in line is these two couples, Joe and Ann. And I'm standing in line, and from what I know, I'm the only black person in line, so I see people like look at me. So I noticed that, and Joe, he didn't know how to interact with me, so it was like small talk. And then Ann, she asked me, she said, oh, so Democrat or Republican? And I'm like, oh, I don't like to put myself in a box. So after that, her husband, he said, oh, well, he said, I understand what you mean. He said, I used to be a Democrat. And he said, but now I'm a Republican. And same thing with Ann. And I said, oh, so why was that change? And he said, well, you know, I think being a Democrat is for young kids. And when you're a Democrat, you know, you really think with your feelings. And being a Republican, we really use our brain, like you think analytical when you get older. And when I heard that, I'm like, interesting. And then I look at my friend Lisa, and she's short, but she got a lot of fight in her. So she's like, she's just looking at her. But then she didn't say nothing. She kept her composure. At some point, it so happened that Joe and my friend Lisa was talking, and then me and Ann was talking. And we was having small talk, and by that time, we're getting closer up front. And then I see the people in the line where I used to be at, and I'm thinking, oh, yeah, I got to get in because y'all ain't getting in. There's no way. So when me and Ann was talking, she was telling me, she said, hey, you know, this is the second time I'm wearing my Make America Great Again hat. And I'm like, oh, really? She said, I said, why is that? And she said, well, the first time I wore in Great Falls, and they're both from Idaho, so they drove all the way here. And I'm like, okay. And she said, but now I'm wearing it here because I know that it's good because it's like-minded people here, so I feel comfortable. I'm like, what do you mean you feel comfortable? And she said, oh, because, she said, you don't know what those Democrats are doing? Or it's unsafe. Like, it's not safe wearing that hat here because all these things that can happen to you. And in my head, I'm like, huh, interesting. So as the conversation went on, it kind of ended with, she would say, hey, you know, it's really, I appreciate having this conversation. You're really easy to talk to. But that time when she was mentioning that hat, my mind kind of paused in that sense, just because it's all about perspective, right? And I feel like when she was talking about being unsafe, I really understood that perspective because I think that's how I feel being a black man in America. The only difference is I can't take off my hat. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Lily Clarke grew up in Condon, Montana, where she attended the one-room K-8 schoolhouse, Salmon Prairie School. The frequent wildfires and fire morels that followed sparked her interest in understanding the ecological and social consequences of wildfire and wild mushroom harvests in rural areas. Can you tell that she's a scientist? Following her Fulbright scholarship in Nepal, she returned to Missoula to pursue graduate studies in wildfire at the University of Montana and reconnect with Missoula and its people. I hope she's close by. Please welcome Lily Clarke.
नमस्कार मेरो नाम लिली हो म जंगली च्याउको बारेमा अनुसन्धान गर्छु तपाईलाई सँग कुरा गर्छु This is how I introduced myself on my Fulbright in Nepal. Hello, my name is Lily. I'm studying wild mushrooms. May I speak with you? Kathmandu, a cacophonic kaleidoscope of traffic and stray dogs, of incense stuck in overburnt fruit, of cooking oils laced with cardamom, turmeric, and chili, of conversation, of bantering, of bartering. A 6-hour bus ride takes you 80 miles south to Chitwan, and then a 45-minute tuk-tuk rattling over the fresh roads takes you to Kulesimal, a village along Nepal's Indian border. Banana trees sway between mustard fields. Birds coo in pink dawns and blue evenings, and people walk slowly. This is where I stayed for 4 months, studying how mushrooms affect the culture and economy of the area. During my time in Kulesimal, I challenged myself to become conversational in Nepali. I was being able to say, "Kana deri mito bayo," the food was very good, or "Sapana sanga deknu bayo," did you dream, was often not enough. In one of my first nights in Kulesimal, I was eating steamed rice and spiced lentil soup at my host family's restaurant, a nice word for the local bar. And I watched a young boy whip in and out of the curtained bamboo huts, clenching 5-cent in tips and empty vodka bottles so that people could come and drink without acknowledgement. As I continued to eat, I heard a faucet come on, the drain clogged with white rice, and a cracked voice singing. I got up and peeked around the blue cement wall, and there was Nabin. At the age of 11, Nabin had left his family to come and live with my host family and work for their restaurant so that he could pay for his grade school. During my time in Kulesimal, I would come home exhausted every day from trying to interpret through observations or trying to translate at a toddler's level of a language, and from being a spectacle. Look at how the white woman drinks tea. Look at how quickly she walks. Look at how she struggles to eat with her hand or rides her purple bicycle around asking people about mushrooms. At the end of each day, I would come home and close my door and read Desert Solitaire. And I would come out, and my family would ask me, "What were you doing in there?" Privacy is not a concept in Nepal. I always looked forward to coming home to Nabin. Thankfully, with him, I didn't need words. In the mornings, he would chase away the dogs at our 5 a.m. morning runs. I'd treat us to sweet milk tea. We'd kick around the soccer ball, draw mushrooms with colored pencils. I always looked forward to coming home to Nabin because I wasn't a white woman. I always looked forward to coming home to Nabin because then I was Lily. One day, Nabin asked me if I'd like to come and meet his family. I said, yes, of course. Only my host father had ever gone once. We picked a day, hopped on our bicycles, picked up 2 bags of sweet oranges that his sister loved, and I made the honest mistake of insisting that we get a kukura chicken rather than kukura komasu, chicken meat, and he stuffed a live 7-pound hen into my bike basket. Over narrow trails, fresh dirt roads, and a dry riverbed, we arrived at his family's home. I came up to about here on me, and while we waited for his mother to return from the fields, we ducked in over the earthen porch, and on the left there was a small earthen cooking pit, a single greasy pan, and 3 steps to the right, 1, 2, 3, 7 wooden planks covered in mats and blankets where his mother, younger sister, younger brother, and newborn baby brother slept. His sister Ashmina was also particularly radiant. I watched her spin and twirl in her soiled yellow dress, ripping apart the sweet oranges and letting the juice drip onto her bare toes. I'm not sure whatever happened to the chicken. When we left, biking over the rugged terrain, Nabin reached over from his bicycle and grabbed my hand, and that's how we returned home. 8 days ago, this was the end of my story. Sometime after I left Nepal 2 years ago, I found out that Nabin had left my host family, had left school, to return to his home, and then to go to Kathmandu to find work. I knew that Nabin does not need me, and I knew that Nabin would find his own way. I also knew that Nabin did not have a safety net. And for the last year, I've been sending some money to his family for food to try to find a phone number, try to find where he might be working or where he might be living so that he could connect with my good friends in Kathmandu. 7 days ago, my friend Tricky in Kathmandu called me and sent me a picture of still radiant and a little bit more vain 13-year-old Nabin. He's happy. He's working at a restaurant in Kathmandu, living with the family there, and smiled when he said, "I work till 2 a.m. every day and can send home $80 a month to my family." I am so proud of Nabin. And I have questions. I believe that with love comes great responsibility. And I ask, what is my responsibility in this case? How do I offer my help without taking away someone's power? Someone who at the age of 12 left his family village, took a 6-hour bus ride to get to a big city, find work, find a place to stay, and is now supporting his family. I speculate, and I do not have answers. Thank you, my community of Missoula.
Thank you, Lily. Kelsey Stam Jimenez is Program Director at the Mansfield Center at the University of Montana, where she engages students and adults throughout the state in international educational experiences. Originally from Paradise, Montana, Kelsey is passionate about providing international opportunities in the Big Sky State and connecting peoples and cultures. When she's not planning her next adventure, she is busy chasing her 2-year-old with her husband Ben and their 2 smelly hounds. Please welcome Kelsey Stam Jimenez.
So 6 years ago, I took a group of 20 Montana high school students and 2 teachers into the jungle in Cambodia. And after having traveled 2 hours by boat to get to our trailhead, we arrive at this beautiful sandy beach. And being that we're in a tropical country, it was already starting to get hot. We weren't even doing anything yet, and we were already sweating. And this was my first time having done something like this. And so in my head, I'm going through this kind of mental checklist of everything that we needed ready. And so I'm thinking water. Water was the first thing on this list. Because we were going to be hiking for 2 days and spending the night in the jungle and carrying all of the water ourselves. And so I'm handing out water to the kids, and I hand out these water bottles to Cassie, this high school kid who had just been trouble the entire time. And she glares at me. She's too busy flirting with boys, so I think, all right, I'll just pack more water for her. And then I start looking at people's footwear, because I want to make sure that we don't have any sprayed ankles, everybody's got good sturdy shoes. Check, we're good there. Appropriate hiking attire. I look over at our Cambodian guides, and they're wearing flip-flops and shorts and T-shirts, and I think, oh, good, we're set. And then the last thing, mosquito repellent, because the jungles are really buggy, right, in tropical countries. Had plenty of that because I hate bugs. And I'm feeling really good. I'm feeling confident about our team. We have these 2 high school teachers who are very capable leaders. There's Angie. She's a high school science teacher, and she had spent years taking troubled teens into the wilderness on trips, and she was super hardcore. And there was Maria. Maria had been a PE teacher for 30-odd years. She was the most fit 60-year-old I'd ever met. And the kids were excited. We had been spending a couple weeks in this country that was so different, and they were finally getting to do something that was somewhat familiar. These kids knew hiking and they knew camping, and we're going to be doing some really cool things, like we were going to sleep in these hammocks that you zip over yourselves that have these mosquito nets, again, the bugs. And there was a chance that we could see wild elephants, which was also really cool. And so the kids are excited, and we're starting down the path towards the jungle. And as we enter the jungle, it gets really dark really quickly. And we move along this trail, and the trees and the vegetation just gets denser and denser to the point where hardly any sunlight is coming through the canopy. And it's wet, and it's musty from all the decay of leaves and whatever else in the jungle. And pretty soon, as the jungle closes in around us, we're on a single-file trail. And the kids are still excited, and they're walking quickly and laughing, and pretty soon, I hear a scream up ahead. And I think, oh, what is that? So I leave my spot in the back of the line and run up, and there's this girl screaming, shaking her hands, and something brown is on her hand, and she's yelling, "Leech!" And she's shaking her hands, and she's trying to get off, and she flings it off, and it lands right on her cheek. And then she starts screaming even louder. And the 2 Cambodian guides run down. They take the leech off. We calm her down. She gets back in line. I go back to the end of my line. I think, whew, that's over. That was disgusting. And so we keep on walking. Pretty soon, I hear screams up and down the line. We were all covered in leeches. And I start feeling pricks on my arms, on my legs, even under the tongues of my shoes. It was like we were being eaten alive. And I looked down at the forest floor, and it was literally moving. You could see leeches coming in from all sides towards us. And now, leeches do this really gross thing where they stand up on their little leech hind ends and they sway, like trying to sense you, trying to find you. And then as soon as they find you, they stop and they leap. And so the line keeps stopping. None of us can move forward because every time somebody finds a leech, we all have to stop. They have to pick it off. Meanwhile, the rest of us are like dancing in place, like trying to keep our feet off the ground because we're just live bait just standing there, desperately waiting for this line to continue. And we continue hiking like that for 3 hours. It was hell. And we finally get to this spot where we can take a break, and it's this stream with these giant rocks, and we're free from the leeches for a moment, where we can have lunch. And we're handed this lunch of fish and rice wrapped in banana leaves. And I look around at the kids, and their faces are white. And they're not talking, and they're not eating. Not even these high school boys are eating. And I walk up to Angie, to this teacher, and I say, "Angie, how are you doing?" And she looks at me and she says, "Kelsey, I can't do this anymore." And I thought, oh my God, hardcore Angie can't do this anymore? Like, what does this mean for the rest of us? And so I'm thinking about this, and Cassie, the student, walks up to me, which was really strange because she would never normally volunteer to talk to me, ever. And she walks up to me, and she's just looking distressed. And now, the guides had told us somewhat earlier that leeches can smell blood. And this is somewhat of a disputed fact, but it was really bad news because when leeches bite you, they inject this anticoagulant that just makes your blood run. And so our group, having had leeches everywhere, just had bloody spots all over our shirts. People had blood that was running down their heads, and the Cambodian guides had tried to bandage people up the best they could. Looked like a war zone. And so Cassie walks up to me. I say, Cassie, what's going on? And she goes, Kelsey, I'm on my period. And I think, oh my God, can leeches get up there? Are they up there already? How would we even know if they're up there? How would we get them out? And I reassure her that no, everything's fine, don't worry, you're good. But inside, I was freaking out and panicking. But I was responsible for her. I was responsible for all these kids, so no way could I show how terrifying that thought was. And so I'm thinking about options for what to do. And A, we can walk back the way we came for 3 hours, and looking at the kids, I didn't think that anybody could handle that. And even if we did do that, could we even get a boat to get back to our village? The other option was to keep going. The guides told me that we weren't even halfway there yet, and that the leeches are going to get worse because it's even more wet as you get deeper into the jungle. Neither of those seem like viable options. And I'm thinking about this, and I see our Cambodian guides, and they're talking on these radios, and they're talking in Khmer, in the Cambodian language. And so I didn't really know what they were saying. And after a little while, I hear a motor, and I think, that's weird. We're in the middle of nowhere, hours away from any other people, and it's getting louder. And I'm hearing more motors, and more and more. And pretty soon, I see a motorcycle come crashing through the jungle on a trail that I didn't even know existed, followed by another one and another one. Well, the Cambodian guides had rallied everybody in the village where we were staying who had a motorcycle to come in and rescue us. And they're slipping and sliding down this muddy trail, and I'm thinking, we're saved. And now, all of the kids prior to the trip had filled out a contract that said, in no way, shape, or form were they ever to get on a motorcycle. The contract now reads, except with Kelsey's permission. And so we get on the motorbikes and we go whizzing down the trail, over tree trunks and under branches, and I felt such a profound sense of relief that we were saved. And it was also the first time that I was able to notice the jungle around me. And it was beautiful, and there were so many different kinds of plants and flowers, and we go through this field where elephants had just been through and was pockmarked with big footprints, and we rise over the mountain as the sun's starting to set, and we head into the village. And there we were able to take baths. We took these bucket baths, which is basically just a little plastic bowl that you douse yourself with cold water, but it was the best bath that I'd ever had. And I meet the kids for dinner, which was, again, rice, and it was the best rice that I had had. And the kids are laughing and joking with each other again, having really bonded through this traumatic experience together. And I look over at Cassie, and Cassie continues to glare at me and flirt with boys, and I think, oh good, we're back to normal. And I start reflecting on the day and the fact that I had spent that whole day wishing that I had been anywhere else but there. And now I felt so grateful for the Cambodian people who were so kind and generous, and for this country that was so strange, but we were learning so much from, and that we learned what we were capable of. And I learned what I was capable of. And now Cambodia is one of my favorite places in the world. And now I've also remembered to add leech repellent to my checklist.
Thank you, Kelsey. Part of our job at Tell Us Something is to help people get their stories heard. We do that here at the Wilma in Missoula 4 times a year, once a year in Butte, and once a year in Helena. We also help people get their stories heard on the Tell Us Something podcast, which if you haven't subscribed to, you should. Beyond subscribing to the podcast, a great way for you to help people get their stories heard is to share these podcasts when you see them pop up in your social media feeds. And if you were at a live event and a specific story resonated with you, share that too. And also review us on Apple Podcasts and on Stitcher. Thank you to all of our storytellers so far tonight. Thank you to our ASL interpreters, Bonnie Curian and Denise May. Thank you to our sponsors, Logjam Presents, the Wilma, The Good Food Store, CabinetParts.com, Missoula Broadcasting Company, Axis Physical Therapy, they healed me right up, Missoula Federal Credit Union, Gecko Designs, and Missoula Bone and Joint. Also, Enlighten Labs, Fieldy Design, Rockin' Rudy's. When you frequent these businesses, please thank them for their support of Tell Us Something and of live storytelling in Missoula. Thank you for being here tonight. Without your love and open hearts and respect and your very presence, Tell Us Something couldn't exist. Last year was our biggest year, and we're looking forward to another big year. 48 storytellers last year shared 48 stories, while almost 4,000 people sat listening. We had 4 shows in Missoula, 1 in Helena and 1 in Butte, and we're going to keep growing as we move forward. We also now offer storytelling workshops. We do one-on-one workshops with people and also group and corporate workshops for storytelling. So if you're interested in that, you can go to tellussomething.org and click on workshops to learn more. We're going to take an intermission. So let's get up and stretch. We have a 10-minute intermission. When we get back, I'll tell you the exciting new way we're going to do audience participation. See you in 10 minutes. Marissa, will you hit go, please? Thank you. Welcome back. So, I know I made you this big promise about this new way we're going to do audience participation, and I'm going to explain what that way would be. But we're not going to do it that way, and I'll tell you why. So, all of you have a lot of stories about being strangers in a strange land, and they're really long. And my feeling is that for me to invite you all to read those stories, which is what was supposed to happen, I was going to send volunteers out into the crowd, and they were going to pick people at random to read them. And they were so long, I think that would be a big ask. So, instead, we're going to do it the way we've always done it. Welcome my friends Lauren Champa and Amy Thompson for audience participation. I'll take it.
Hi, guys. All right. Our daughter's senior year of high school was pure hell. She only applied to 2 schools. Neither was a Montana school. First was Duke. She was not accepted. Second was in North Carolina. At $40 grand a year, she would blow her whole education fund. She was accepted, but got smart and realized it was not affordable. MSU college weekend was coming up, and her father, a bobcat, told her we were going. I'm a Grizz, although, sitting in the ballroom with hundreds of people who are bobcats. Stranger in a strange land. It felt like all's well, she's a cat and loves MSU.
Once while recreating in a bar in the woods, I decided it was time for a nap and went to lay down in my friend's white Subaru. While my friend spent the next hour searching the woods and a riverbank for me, I was found when a stranger entered her white Subaru heading home. A stranger in a sea of white Subarus.
All right, we got a long one, but this is good. I was on a canoe trip in Big Bend National Park, where the Rio Grande is the border between the U.S. and Mexico. It was the last night of what had been a carefree adventure when the first party we'd seen in days pulls up to our beach to solicit help with a tragedy upstream. Simultaneously, a few good old Texas oil boys motor up from downstream. They offered to motorboat the 2 women and needed cell phone service, but in order to do so, needed to drop their friends, Will and Tom, on our beach. Will's first question was the difference between a kayak and a canoe. We explained the difference based off of the paddles, to which he responded, "You're trying to tell me that if I'm in a kayak and I get so drunk I can only paddle on one side, then suddenly I'm in a canoe?" Similar hilarity ensued between our hippie millennial group and these Texan oil workers before their buddies returned only to announce that Will and Tom had to paddle the boats the distressed parties left behind. The boat, complete with their 2 dogs, was so tippy, but those guys were 0 to 100 and left us on the beach to contemplate just how strange a land we were in.
Once passing through the Midwest, my ex-wife and I noticed an old man sneak into the county fair we were attending on Bring Your Grandparents to the Fair for Free Day. She had little patience for the odd people I like to chat with, and she left me with him and went to look at the pigs. "Are you 2 married?" he asked. I nodded. He said, "You want to be careful with that. My ex-wife tried to kill me 3 times. My face screwed up in disbelief. "Yep," he went on. "She poisoned me with arsenic, stabbed me 3 times with a kitchen knife, and had her boyfriend clobber me with a hammer." I was about to call him on this when he raised his hat and revealed a 1/2-inch deep furrow 3 inches along at the top of his bald head. Was I the stranger, or was he?
I pulled into Missoula in September with y'alls in my bag, a yes ma'am or 2 in my pocket, and my mama's hug still around my neck. The Blue Ridge behind me, the Rockies standing sentry into all that lay ahead. A new helping career, a little blue house, a place where outdoor pursuit is palpable, the community's hands are capable. Creeks are water formation, and the only pain in the neck is the gray of winter. I came with a southern shyness, new on skis and in the big west, but welcomed we've been. I'm happy to have landed west of this divide. The real one and the real people in this place prove doesn't exist.
A stranger to fly fishing and a stranger to fly fishing on the Little Spokane River, a tributary to the Spokane River, my guide and the other half of the campus mail and furniture moving crew advised me to set the hook immediately once I saw the bite. Within 20 minutes, I got a bite, and with an Olympian's athleticism, set the 4-inch trout 10 feet in the air, only to continue swimming upriver on the Little Spokane.
I took a subway from Oz to Kansas. Actually, it was from west to East Berlin. The west was all bright lights and decadence, while the east was army gray and discipline. I was dressed like Sergeant Pepper, and my Brit buddy, Mick, looked like Buffalo Bill. We were a center of attention for Soviet soldiers and the Politzi. Mick and I had a bad beer in a beer hall and got the hell out of Dodge before sundown.
In the middle of 9th grade, my family moved from New York State to liberal, by golly, Kansas. I was a dancer and was in the habit of wearing my homemade, flowy, swirly dance costumes to school. The popular girls' clique could hardly wait to see what the new girl from New York, city was all that they knew of New York, was wearing. But my clothes never looked like what they were expecting, their expectations primed by their fantasy perusal of their 17 magazines.
Thank you all for sharing your stories. Thank you, Lauren and Amy, for reading them. Dick King was born and raised on the High Line. He is a sugar beater from Chinook, Montana. Dick attended the University of Montana and received a master's degree in American history in 1971. That's the year I was born. After which he became a Peace Corps volunteer and served 4 years in Afghanistan. He returned to Montana in 1975 and married Tove Elvrom in 1980. They have 1 son, Alex. Dick has worked in community and economic development and moved to Missoula in 2000. Please welcome Dick King.
Right up on the mic. Well, it is April 1975. I finished my time with the Peace Corps, and while I was there, I worked for the Afghan Tourist Organization. So now I'm headed back home overland, But so I'm a tourist. So I leave Afghanistan on a shuttle bus and head toward Iran. I get to the no man's land border, get off the shuttle bus and have to walk to the Iranian fence. And I see some border agents. As I get closer, I notice they have weapons. They have pistols. They have some automatic rifles. Behind them is a machine gun nest. So it's a little bit disconcerting, and I get to the fence, and there's three guys that meet me. They take my backpack, lift up my shirt. They take my money belt, which has my passport, my wallet, my traveler's checks, and then they hold my hands up. Off comes my shirt, off come my pants, off come my T-shirt, so I'm almost naked. They then point to a tunnel. I guess I'm supposed to walk there. So I will go to the tunnel. It's concrete block, and I'm very disconcerted and nervous. But I enter the tunnel. The guy points me to go, 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 and walk through the tunnel. There's a few windows, and there's guards looking at me through the windows. The tunnel's leaking water from the top, so I'm getting a little wet. Finally, I reach the end of the tunnel, and there's my backpack and the rest of my stuff. I check it all, and it's all there, but I'm very disconcerted and worried that, where am I at? What's going to happen? Well, there's a shuttle bus now that will take me to the Iranian city of Mashhad, which is one of the greatest pilgrimage cities in all of Islam. So I get on the shuttle bus and start going, and there's a few other tourists there who didn't have to go through the same agony that I did to enter the country. But we start talking, and I tell them about my experience, about the border guards. And they said, those weren't border guards, that was the Savak. I said, the what? The Savak, the Shah's secret police. They run the border. They run the country. So they said, be very careful. Be very careful. We get to Mashhad. It's later in the afternoon. Find a place to stay. There's several wonderful mosques in the city. The night lights come on and highlight the minarets in the mosques. So it's quite scenic. And then the morning comes, and I go to the bus station and take a bus, get a bus ticket to go to Tehran. So I get on the bus, and I'm the only foreigner on the bus. It's full, but the rest of the people on the bus are Iranians. And there's no place to sit on the bus. So do I have to stand on a 9-hour bus ride? A couple of Iranians look at me, and they signal me to come. They've moved a couple of people, and they've opened a seat for me. So they made me feel welcome. And the bus leaves Mashhad and heads, and it's kind of dry land. It's sort of desert-like, not very fertile. But in the distance, you start to see a little greenery and a few hills. Go farther, and those become more of a mountains. Pretty soon, we're driving up a pass, and the bus gets to the top of the pass, and I look to the north. There's the Caspian Sea. Incredibly gorgeous view. And the bus starts to drop off of the pass, and we head to Tehran. It's about a 9-hour bus trip and all. And we get to Tehran, and I go to the ticket office for the bus station. Where can I stay? Where should I stay? And they direct me to a student hostel just a short ways away. So I walk over there, check in, go up to the second floor, and there's probably 15 other young people while finding a cheap place to stay overnight. Put my sleeping bag on the floor, and that's my reservation, my sleeping bag on the floor. The next morning, I get up and I start to explore Tehran. It's an interesting city. It's very scenic, very well built. Buildings are very clean, well done. And I'm walking around. Here are some young Iranians, and they look at me, and they come over, and they start talking to me. And in Afghanistan, I could speak Farsi, which is a sort of a dialect of Persian. So I start to speak that, and the Iranians kind of look down on Farsi as not very good language. But we could start to talk, and then they asked me, where are you from? And I said, well, I'm from America. Well, they pat me on the back. They're smiling. They said, welcome, welcome. We love Americans. And then one of them reaches over and grabs my blue jeans, my Levi jeans, which I don't have on tonight. And I want to buy those. I want to buy those. I pay you good money for them. I said, well, I can't afford to sell them because it's all I have. This and a pair of shorts for the whole trip. They talk it over and they look at what they said. Next time you come back to Iran, bring lots of jeans with you. Apparently, those were really a hot item at that time. And a couple more days, I go to the museums in Tehran. The people there are always full of help, where you want to go and what you want to see. And it's a wonderful experience, and I enjoyed my stay there. I then get on a bus and next go to the city of Isfahan, which is in central Iran. It's one of the major points of the Silk Road. You had Saudi Arabians, you had Egyptians, you had Europeans, the Chinese, all of them trading items in Isfahan. At one time, it was one of the world's largest cities. There are 5 bridges over the largest river in Iran that borders Isfahan, and these bridges were started to be built about the 2nd century A.D. There's one of the bridges that is 33 arches. Amazing. So I walk each of the bridges over the river and I explore the scenery and enjoy myself. And again, if I need directions, I ask an Iranian, no problem. The next day, I decided I need to visit the Blue Mosque, or the Shah Mosque, the King Mosque. It's pretty well known as one of the classic examples of Islamic architecture and design in all of the world. So I go there, and it's startling. It's the blue tile, the different colors of tile, the mosaic, and the calligraphy, the minarets. There's 4 minarets that go way up into the air. And I walk around and around it, and then there's a major entrance to the mosque and a big courtyard inside, but I'm a little hesitant to go in. And then the Iranian sees me, signals me to come in, points to me, and I walk around the courtyard, and I can look in and see all the different excellent, wonderful art, very stunning. And again, the sun is shining, and the tile is reflecting the sun. So it was a wonderful experience. It's about midday and time for lunch. So to tell the Iranian thank you for the tashakur, for the visit, and head out and we'll go a little ways. And Isfahan is also famous for its Grand Bazaar. Well, I didn't know where that was at, but I looked down the street, and there's a whole lot of people in the street gathered around. It's an outdoor market, a bazaar. So I head there, and gee, there's carpets for sale, there's, you name it, there's all kinds of things for sale. But I look at that, and I'm hungry, so I go to a restaurant, and not a restaurant, a food booth, and there's naan coming out of the oven, and there's charcoal, and they're making tacos, and it smells wonderful. So I start to talk to the guy running the place and order some lunch with that and this, and then I hear a sound. I hear a sound. Louder, louder, louder. Well, I was in the Army before I went to the Peace Corps, and I knew what military helicopters were because I rode in them. I look up, and here come about 20 American helicopters flying low over the mosque and over the bazaar. I'm stunned. I'm about ready to walk away. The louder and louder it gets, the Iranians are host like this, and they turn their back. They're mad. I want to leave. The guy at the food booth puts his hand on my shoulder, tells me, "You're okay. You're with us." I also remember attending a lecture by Henry Kissinger in Afghanistan a few months before I left, where he called the Shah of Iran the linchpin of American foreign policy in the Middle East. And that makes me shake my hand. After that, I go to Shiraz, which is near the Persian Gulf, and from there I visit Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the ancient Persian Empire. That's about 30 miles from Shiraz. We'll go there, and there's fabulous ruins. It goes back to the 4th century BC, the Persian Empire. Well, I took a shuttle there, and it gets about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and we walked over it, everything, and looked at it, and all kinds of interesting things. And then there's a shuttle that leaves, so I was about ready to go. Well, there's a couple of Europeans. There's a Brit and a German and a Frenchman, and they look at me, and they, where are you going? I said, well, I got to catch the shuttle. I'm going back to Shiraz. No, don't leave now. Stay for the night show, the sound and light show. We're going to go to that. I said, oh, so we go get a bite to eat and things, come back, sit in the bleachers. The sun sets, and here come the lights on the ancient ruins that have been so well kept. They light it up. It's gorgeous. It highlights each of the architectural features. It's stunning. I'm just amazed. The lights go down, and all of a sudden the Iranian people at the site, all of the ones that were running it, they turn their back away from Persepolis, from the ceremonial palace. Up pops a big screen. It's the Shah of Iran telling us he is the Shah, the King of Kings. He's basically saying, I'm related to Darius I, the Persian Empire, back way before Alexander the Great came and destroyed Persepolis. But the young Iranians turned their back to the Shah on the screen. Once again, I remember Henry Kissinger's lecture, The Lynchpin of American Foreign Policy in the Middle East. Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. Ibrahin Mena is from Caracas, Venezuela. He holds a bachelor's degree in education and a master's degree in journalism. He has more than 10 years of experience teaching at the primary, secondary, and university levels. He was honored as Teacher of the Year in Caracas in 2014. Ibrahin lived in Malta, Europe for a year and a half and arrived in Missoula in 2016 to teach at Missoula International School. He loves dancing, writing, and traveling. Please welcome Ibrahin Mena.
Hi. Let's start this telling you that I am super glad, very glad, that I have survived officially 3 years, 3 winters in this land. I am not going to talk about my first experience in the snowball, though. My history begins in January 4 of this year. I was grocery shopping with a friend of mine. Her name is Ismara. Her and I went to the grocery shopping. I told her that I was going for another side of the shop, and she went to another side of the shop. When I was looking at the shelf, suddenly I felt someone that was coming. As is natural, I put myself out, letting that person pass. But that person didn't pass. I wait. He didn't pass. I started thinking that he was trying to provoke me. So I left and wait for about a minute so that person passed. He didn't pass. He stayed exactly in the part of the aisle where I was. And I started looking at the shelves. So, needing to buy some sponge, I went back to the place where I was. And I started looking at the shelf, choosing the kind of sponge I wanted to buy. Well, that person told me that those sponges were good for me, that I should use them to take a shower and use them as much as I can to take my skin off. I was speechless. A lot of things happened in my mind in that moment. My mind was super confused. I felt vulnerable. I didn't know how to act. And I remember in that moment, a very bad experience happened to me last spring when someone stopped his car and started shouting at me, super mad. I was super scared because he told me that I was a black rat and I shouldn't leave. Having little experience didn't help me because I learned about racism by news, by book, by teachers, but living this kind of experience feels super different. So I went immediately to see where my friend Mara was. I told her what happened. She was very sad as well. She told me that she was worried about herself because she's from Venezuela as well. But she started calming me down. She told me, you are a great person, and if that person knows you very well, she wouldn't do that. He wouldn't do that. So she started telling me beautiful things about how the person I was and making me feel better. I was so sensitive, so I left, but still I left her for a little bit and continued grocery shopping. I was thinking, what should I do? I have to do something with this. This is not right. I was feeling mad at the entire situation and super frustrated because I didn't know what to do. Like, I have little knowledge about racism, and I also was frustrated with my English. At this point, I think you have realized that my English need to improve a little bit. So I started thinking, should I go there and ask what's going on? What is wrong with my skin? I like that. Or maybe having a conversation to drive him to understand that there are more things that we have in common than the one that we have difference. I didn't do anything. I just went to line up, and after a while, someone passed with a few items in her hand, and I let her go. Well, she was super grateful. After a little while, another old lady came to me, and she told she had a few items as well, and I let her go. She couldn't be more grateful, really. She started talking to me, telling me that she really liked the kind of person I was, that she was looking around if someone offered that. And she was so happy. Actually, she told the cashier that I was so nice, and this is the kind of person we need here. I wasn't talkative at all. She asked me many questions, but I couldn't answer. I was very quiet in that moment. But she doesn't have any idea that she brought me back to the real people, the majority of the people I know, and I feel like people is here in Missoula. She brought me back to that beautiful paradise I thought when I first arrived here. Because that's what I remember of Missoula. beautiful landscape, a bunch of hippie that smile to me when I am walking in the street, people that stop me in the in the store and try to have beautiful conversation with me in the bar. That's the real people I really appreciate in Missoula. Also, those that from the very beginning support me when I arrived here, people from Missoula International School, the best environment I have ever had. Students, my boss, parents, a lot of them present in this place now, giving me support. Well, after paying, Ismara and I left. I start the car, start driving, but don't remember anything else. But my friend Ismara on my side, a deep silence, a big sigh, and maybe thousands of tears coming out of my eyes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibrahin. Jesse Ballard is a local childbirth educator, lactation counselor, and birth doula. In other words, all things birth, boobs, and babies. She is married with 2 kids and loves travel, international food, and being involved in local theater productions. Please welcome Jesse Ballard.
If you're from Africa, why are you white? It's not just a line from Mean Girls, friends. That's the story of my life. Having spent the first 18 years of my life in Kenya, East Africa, and looking the way I do, I've had a bit of identity confusion, some dissonance in my life, and it's been hard for people to figure me out. Every phase of my life has had some confusing aspects as I've thought about who am I and where am I from. Except at the very beginning, things were kind of fun. It was kind of cool being the girl from Africa. In fact, every 2 years, my family would come to the United States to visit our extended family, and my brother and I were assigned the fabulous task of picking a cereal when we went grocery shopping. Now, I don't know if you've ever thought about what a wonderland the grocery aisle, specifically the cereal aisle in an American supermarket is, but to my brother and I, it was amazing. We would just run up and down the aisle, the fluorescent lights illuminating a variety of colors and shapes. Everything was just so vibrant and exciting because in the 80s and 90s in Kenya, East Africa, our cereal choice was Weetabix. Are you familiar with Weetabix? I think it originated in England. Picture a McDonald's hash brown shaped thing, but hard as a brick and brown, okay? You'd have to pour a ton of milk and whack that thing with a spoon to be able to eat it, and then it was tasteless. So imagine my brother and I just overwhelmed by these fabulous choices in the grocery store. My first few years of schooling in Kenya were actually at a British school. So when I arrived there, I was seen as the American. My accent was received as very American. I also had some disconcerting moments there. For example, I told my friends when we were sitting down to have lunch that I brought a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Now, in British English, jelly is the equivalent of Jell-O. So you can imagine the looks on their faces when I told them that I was going to consume a peanut butter and Jell-O sandwich. I remember just feeling a bit like an oddball there. My voice sounded different, my experiences were different than a lot of the very British students there. And I remember coming home upset and just feeling strange on many occasions. But I got the hang of it. I got a hang of the British English. And then I ended up transferring to an American international school. So there I come in with my Britishisms, and I failed a lot of spelling tests. Neighbor, color, theater, those are spelled a lot differently. I also made the mistake, and picture this is elementary school, of asking to borrow a rubber in the middle of class. Now, it wasn't all disconcerting and uncomfortable situations. I have a wonderful memory of sitting under this beautiful flame tree in the middle of campus, huddled together with my friends from all over the world, my friend Carrie from Australia, my friend Martha from Ethiopia, huddled together with our peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and we'd have to duck. I say huddled because we had these big birds called kites, and at lunchtime they would just swoop down and attack anybody and grab their lunch, so we huddled close. We had amazing conversations, and a lot of my great memories are over that time. So that's where I did some elementary, finished up high school, then it was time for college. Now, the reassuring thing about college is that everybody was starting afresh, right? Everybody's figuring out who they are that freshman year. But what is that one question that you always get asked, or that I was asked? First it was, what's your name? Then, where are you from? Now, back in that last school, I had also had that experience where we were sitting around, this is in elementary school back in Kenya, and we were asked to come up to this giant world map and put a push pin where we were from. And I watched every one of my classmates go up there and confidently put one of those things up on the map. And they knew exactly where they were from. And I was anticipating my turn to go up there. And I thought, where am I going to put this push pin? I knew that I was born in some tiny little town in a place called Illinois, but I would struggle to find Illinois on the map, let alone this tiny town. And my life experience said I was from Kenya, but there were people in that room who were Kenyan, and they looked Kenyan. What was I going to do when I got up there? Where was I going to put that push pin? And I remember getting up there and choking up, and tears started running down my face, and I couldn't put that pin anywhere, and I just sat down. So flashbacks of that are coming back to me as I'm at college, and everyone's asking me, where are you from? And I know they want the pushpin answer, right? They just want to know, yeah, you're from Chicago, you're from Butte, wherever you're from. But I couldn't give that answer. Excuse me. So what did I say? Well, I tried to come up with a quick answer. I knew the answer they weren't looking for. Well, in the 1920s, my great-grandparents came over as missionaries to Kenya, and then my dad was born, or my grandfather was born there. He became a doctor. My dad was born there, and he became an international school student, then a teacher. Then he went to the States. He met my mom. Then they had me, and then I moved back to Kenya. So, yeah. That's not the answer they were looking for. I also got involved in some things at college that made for some other weird cultural experiences. For example, I decided to join an improv troupe, which, for those of you that are familiar with that, is full of pop culture references, right? All this American cultural references. So here's all my castmates making jokes about famous pop stars and actors, and I'm over here making Richard Leakey jokes. So college was weird too. I remember going home for Christmas break, and wherever home was at that time, and coming back, and my roommate making an interesting comment because I'd spent that time with my family and my accent had kind of got mixed up again. And she said, "Oh yeah, I forgot you were from Kenya." And that really struck me. I thought, what? She forgot? That's such a big part of who I am. And it got me just thinking about who I was at that particular point, that she had forgotten that that's where I was from or where I grew up. So I made it through college, cue the grad school era of my life, and my husband and I were living in a small town in Illinois, actually, and he was on campus and met two international students, Pauline from Kenya and Zanele from Swaziland. And he made the connection. Hey, my wife is from Kenya. You should come over for tea. So here they come, and they knock on the door. The door opens, and here's me standing there. We ended up having a wonderful time bonding over tea, of course, and all the similarities and differences between the parts of Africa that we'd grown up in. So it was a lovely time. And then later in our married life, we had the wonderful experience of going back to Kenya. And when I got there, I felt that my heart was at home in so many ways. We even went back to my old American International School campus, and I saw that tree where I used to sit with my friends and kind of ducked instinctively for those kites to swoop down and get me. And there was that red earth that we used to sit in. It's indescribable. You have to go and see it. And it would stain whatever you were wearing when you sat down. And the beautiful bright orange tree color. And it really made me feel at home in my heart. But on that same trip, wherever we drove, wherever we walked, the little Kenyan kids would yell out, "Mzungu! Mzungu!" which is the Kiswahili word for white person, foreigner, other, right? So it was this weird juxtaposition of feeling so at home and yet feeling like this total stranger in this land as well. So I found out that I do have a label, I do have a title. I am what is called a TCK, a third culture kid. And I have taken the culture of my parents, the culture of the country where I grew up, and I've mushed it into this third culture, this other culture. And it's still a learning process for me. It's still a growing process. I've learned to be more comfortable with being an other, but for sure, it still has its difficulties. But what's still fun for me is going to the grocery store and watching my kids in the cereal aisle and thinking, if only they knew about Weetabix. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. We have one more storyteller this evening. Before I introduce her, you should know about some upcoming Tell Us Something events. We'll be in Helena at the Myrna Loy on May 9th. When we did Getting Away With It here, that was so popular that we're going to do Getting Away With It in Helena on May 9th. If you know anybody in Helena, it could be. If you know anybody in Helena, please let them know. The next Missoula event is June 12th here at the Wilma. The theme is, What Are the Chances? Tickets for that show go on sale tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. We are taking story pitches for both shows. If you have a story or know someone who does, the pitch line is 406-203-4683. You have 3 minutes to leave your pitch. All right, let's bring this home. You ready? Carissa Benjamin is originally from Miami, Florida, and moved to Missoula in 2001, eventually making it her forever home, which she shares with her husband, 2 young children, and an elderly yellow lab. She works as a physical therapist for Missoula County Public Schools and moonlights as an ice hockey referee. Do not mess with her. She also owns and operates a mobile physical therapy practice where she enjoys working with individuals in their natural habitat. She also loves all things story. Please welcome Carissa Benjamin.
It's bright up here. Glad I can't see you out there. My story begins in a locked water closet in a bus stop in Nice, France. My boyfriend, Tim, is on the other side of the locked bathroom, and he is certain that I'm being electrocuted. He comes to this conclusion not just from my screams and banging on the other side of the door, but what he imagines are these rogue electrical wires streaming about, and maybe some flashing lights that are coming from underneath the door. Now, Tim isn't typically one to panic. He tends to stay cool in these types of situations. I remember when we first started dating, he was the passenger in my 1994 top-heavy Isuzu Trooper, and I take the bad corner of Fall Creek Road a little too fast and begin to fishtail from one side of the road to the other. And from the passenger side, he just calmly coaches me through it. Put your hands on the steering wheel. You've got this. Well, I didn't have it. And I crashed off the side of the road, nearly hitting a tree. After checking in that I was okay, he just sort of moved into action, like he always does. Fast forward a couple years, we're traveling together throughout Europe for about a month. And even though I felt very prepared, I read all of the books, one thing that neither Tim or I had anticipated during our trip is just how difficult it would be to find a public restroom. It was so difficult, in fact, that I actually began wearing this one particular black cotton, very flowing skirt. Because what it allowed is when we couldn't find a bathroom, and so we often opted for a public space, green space, or park that I could very discreetly sort of squat, use my skirt as a tent to preserve the modesty of the lower half of my body, and use it to dab as well if necessary. Tim, being the person that he was, I think was even more inconspicuous than I was, and he was a big fan of the soccer squat. For those of you who don't know what the soccer squat is, you basically bend over like you're going to tie your shoes, but rather than tie your shoes, you first check that you're sort of on the uphill side of things, unzip your fly, and try not to get your shoes wet. So we had lots of opportunities to find creative ways to use the bathroom, and which I have to say is really funny, because when I was upstairs during intermission, there were some ladies who were cleverly making their way out of the long, long line of the women's room. There was no line at all in the men's room, and some of them just went into the men's room. So when you have to go, you have to go. So another creative thing that we had done is we just basically tried to time our bladder breaks with food breaks, so we can combine those basic bodily functions like eating and peeing. But it was a little bit upsetting because at one time we had noticed that they'd actually added a charge on our food bill for using the bathroom. And we weren't really doing ourselves any favors because we are traveling in Europe. There's lots of delicious coffee. That's usually how we started our day, at an outdoor cafe in a cobblestone road, drinking 1, 2, 3 cups of coffee. And then we were traveling by foot and putting in lots of miles, so we're trying our best to stay hydrated, drinking lots of water. It was also 2017, and the women's national soccer team was participating in the World Cup. So it was easy to find an excuse to hop in a bar and support them on the television, so enjoying refreshing room temperature pints of beer. So essentially, we're fueling this trip on a parfait of diuretics. But to this point, no one had really been injured with this lack of finding a bathroom, unless you take into account our friend, our traveling partner, who had the unfortunate experience of contracting a nasty stomach virus and had an interesting run-in with a roadside porta potty. But that's not my story to tell. On this one day, however, things are getting serious. I really have to pee. We happen to find ourselves in this industrial part of the city center. So I'm scanning my environment. Okay, no green spaces, no restaurants, there are these really large concrete and metal sculptures, and I'm considering climbing in and seeing if I can find some place to seek refuge. But things have really moved past that point. I mean, my bladder is at the max fill line. I'm starting to walk really fast, but my steps aren't very long because I can't really risk like being like this, because the pull of gravity, I think, is too great of a match for my pelvic floor muscles at this point. So I'm kind of, you know, just trying to keep moving, keep my eyes on the horizon, and there it is, sort of this light in the distance, WC, water closet. And so, you know, we scurry over there as quickly as we can, and I'm feeling pretty excited about this, and I'm not going to wet my pants. And I get there, and this particular water closet is coin operated. And I actually, to be honest, I can't recall, like, if I was really disappointed. It was a problem. I just don't recall. Was it because I didn't have money, or I was just really irritated that I'd have to pay again to use the bathroom? And so these thoughts are going through my head, and there's this gentleman who's actually exiting the water closet or the bathroom stall. And I feel like he reads me. He sees the distress on my face. He knows exactly what's going on, and he holds the door open for me. So I'm like, great. And so I sneak in there, and, you know, I'm starting to really slow down now because I know relief is in sight. And so I'm taking my time, close the door. You know, maybe there's some, like, Sade playing in the background. Not really. But so then I kind of, like, back over the commode, squat down, pull down my undergarments. And it's not even a moment after I begin in savoring, you know, the emptying of my bladder that confusion starts to set in. Like, something's happening. Like, my feet are wet, but I know I'm not outside. I'm over the toilet. I don't think I'm creating, like, a backsplash. It's just more and more water, and I notice it's, like, coming in from all around. And then as I'm starting putting that together, there's the commode actually backs back into the wall, and lights are flashing, and so I'm, like, panicking, and this is the screams that Tim is hearing on the other side of the door. And so I'm realizing I need to make an escape. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what else to do. And so I rush over. Maybe I pull up my pants. I make it to the door, and the door's locked. And it will not let me out. And I'm banging on the door, and Tim's banging on the door, and I'm like, you know, is this water closet possessed? I just can't figure it out. And then just as I don't know what else to do, things start to calm down. The lights glow again. The water's, like, slowed to a trickle, and the toilet comes back out. And finally, the door unlocks. I exit the water closet to an onslaught of onlookers, and Tim there giving me sort of a once-over head to toe, notices I'm sopping wet. I kind of walk out in my chacos, water sloshing underfoot. And he just, you know, I'm clearly dazed. I'm confused. And he just takes me gently by the shoulders and escorts me out of the bus stop. I still can't get my head around what's happened, and I'm sort of mumbling like a mad person. Like, oh, what just happened? Why did that happen to me? Well, I don't know what happened. And it wasn't actually until I needed to prepare for this story that I looked into it. You know, what happened that day? And so I took to the internet, as most people do in this situation, and I went to YouTube and I searched for self-cleaning toilets. Maybe you guys already knew that that's what happened. But I sort of needed some confirmation about that. But the one question that sort of remained was that stranger who held the door open for me. Did he know? Thank you.
Thank you, Carissa. Thank all of you for being here tonight and for sharing in your community's stories and for sharing your stories. I appreciate all of you. Thanks to all of our sponsors. Thanks especially to our storytellers. Oh, they're out of order. Okay. Jason Voorhees, Dick King, Lily Clarke, Casey Stan Jimenez, Ibrahin, Mena, Jesse Ballard, Carissa Benjamin, and Mike Jakupcak. Thank you all so much. We missed Lily, but we love you, Lily. Hey, thanks everybody for being here. June is the next Missoula event. Tickets go on sale for that tomorrow. What are the chances? There are email sign-up sheets up on the bar too if you want to get on that email list. Have a fantastic night, and we'll see you next time.